that's some tough fabric. So this is the same fabric that I have on the walls as acoustic treatment. Although this isn't the acoustic treatment, this is just the covering for the acoustic treatment. But behind here, we have a little guy here that hasn't seen the light of day in a very, very long time. And by little, I mean huge. Oh man, you forget how big an 18-inch sub is if you haven't seen one in a while. And I have not seen this one in 6 years, 7 years now. It's been a while. There she is. So, size-wise, like Trump, I've got huge hands. Huge, huge hands, huge. But there's a razor blade for size comparison. She's a pretty big girl, for sure. But I need a pretty big girl to shake the house. So when I initially bought this sub, I did not spend much on it. I got the cheapest 18 I could possibly get because I was already pretty deep financially into this theater. And that is probably the dumbest decision I ever made. This is not the place that you want to shortchange yourself on the base end, but to be honest with you, it's really been impressive. I mean, it knocks most people's socks off for sure. It didn't knock my socks off. It sounds good, and actually it sounds surprisingly good considering how cheap it is. And I don't even remember how much I paid for it, but it was cheap enough that I was buying this more for the box than I was for the driver itself, and I had planned down the road definitely to upgrade the driver. And we are down the road, and it is time to upgrade the driver. So we're going to pull this thing out and take a closer look at it. So let's go over what makes a average driver an average driver. First of all, paper cone, not rigid, not horrible for a paper cone. It's relatively thick, but it's not rigid by any means. You can see my finger pretty easily can deform that. So a speaker's primary purpose, especially a subwoofer, is to create sound waves by compressing air. Obviously, if your compressor surface can easily be deformed, it doesn't do a great job at compressing said air. What else? Let's look at the back side here. So the next thing we're going to look at, or attempt to, is we're going to try to look at the voice coil size, and that looks like about a 2-inch voice coil, maybe a 2.5 or so. That's actually bigger or wider than I would have thought it was. That's not bad at all. When we look at the spider, which is this yellow thing here, which is basically what keeps that cone in alignment, the spider itself is probably about 6.5 inches or so. Same thing, that's actually a decent sized spider, and when you look at the surround itself, this portion here, this isn't going to allow for a whole lot of flexing anyway, so that spider is really overkill when you look at the overall spider, or the overall surround side here, which isn't going to allow for more than, maybe a 1/2 inch of excursion on a good day downhill with the wind. Looking at the magnet structure, it is a single piece magnet, meaning just this one thin slice, so it's about 3/4 of an inch thick. So definitely nothing special there. The overall size is actually pretty good, and again that speaks back to the voice coil with being a decent size as well. So you got some decent girth here, some decent meat, magnet meat, but you do not have, again, much in terms of excursion. The pull piece is vented, which is basically a hole that runs up through the center of the voice coil, and that as that cone moves in and out, because there's a dust cap on this side, this is your dust cap, there's an air chamber in there, and when it moves in and out, that air has a place to go now, and that helps with excursion, the speed of excursion, and it also helps to cool the magnet structure because you've got air being exchanged in and out, in and out. And that's about it for this one. Here we go! Oh, this is exciting. It just arrived. Oh. This is the most expensive single driver I've ever purchased, so I'm pretty excited about it. And that said, this isn't that expensive. So these run $325, which is a lot of money for a single speaker. But in the world of you know, heavy hitting audio, $325 really isn't that much. Looks like we're double boxed here. Triple box for your protection. Oh crap. Holy crap. Look at the size of that surround. Oh my god. Yep. Comes in at about 45-50 pounds. It's no joke. Oh. Yeah, this thing's nuts. So this is Dayton Audio's highest end sub series, and this is the largest sub that they make in that series. So bottom line, this is one gnarly piece of equipment. Wow. Oh, and that freaking fiber cone is just crazy. Alright, so let's go over some of the differences now. What you see on the top here is a carbon fiber woven cone that is at least 1/8 of an inch thick, if not closer to 1/4. It is super thick and rigid. I mean, beyond rigid. It's like a rock. We have a massive surround here. Again, my hands are not small. Actually, my hands are abnormally large, and this is a solid inch this way, and probably close to 1.5 inches looking at it this way. Just crazy neat. We look at the basket, I'm guessing cast aluminum. Yeah, I think it's cast aluminum. 8-inch spider on it with a 3-inch voice coil. It's dual voice coil, and they're 2 ohm coils. Massively vented spider. And what's nice is they actually put mesh in there too, so that you don't get polyfill or anything that you might have in the box doesn't get sucked up in there and work its way down into the voice coil, so that's great. Triple stack magnet helps with that massive excursion, so over 2 inches of excursion on this thing. It's just mind-boggling. 2 inches of excursion, 18-inch cone. You can imagine the amount of air that this thing can move. It's just ridiculous. If we look at the pole piece, holy cow, that's heavy. Got at least 1.25 inch vent here on the pole piece, so cooling on the motor structure is not going to be a problem. You've got nice heavy-duty spring-loaded binding posts on both sides. A little lighter gauge wire than I would have expected to see. It's probably 18 gauge. So I would have thought it would have been a little heavier there. I guess that's the only thing that's got me a little underwhelmed. But everything else about this driver, and then how that's positively attached, they've actually woven, I don't know if you can see that, but they've woven it in with the Spider, so that it rides along with that. And it also, because it's woven like that, you don't have to, it really cuts down the vibration. You don't have these long stretches that are unsupported. It's just constantly woven. So I really like that. I just would have liked to see a little heavier gauge there. You know, otherwise, oh man, this thing is awesome. I'm really happy with it. And again, for the price, you can, that's a ton of subwoofer for that kind of money. So I'm running just a break-in thing off of YouTube right now, and I'm just using my Dayton audio amps. So those are 150 watts at 8 ohms. I don't know what they are. They're running 2 ohms right now, which is pretty incredible actually, that it even runs 2 ohms. In fact, take a look at this. Watch my voltage jump around. Back up, it just keeps cycling, dropping from 120 down to 117. Every once in a while it'll drop down to 116, so shaving almost 4 volts off as it's just driving the sub. But as far as break-in goes, there's a lot of myths out there that you have to break in your speakers, and if you don't do it right, they'll blow. None of that's true. The reason you break in a speaker is actually just to get it sonically where it's supposed to be, because everything's super stiff when it's brand new. So you won't damage it by going full bore on it, although I'm not going full bore on this obviously. But it's not because I'm afraid of damaging it in any way. It's just because this was the easiest setup I had to drive this and just run some tests for, let it go for an hour or so, and just get that surround to, not just the surround but the Spider and everything. It'll loosen up and throw like it should, and the sooner you can get that broken in, the sooner you get the actual tonality that you're supposed to get out of a sub. So let's let it sit here and dance for a bit while I go get its permanent home a little bit more ready, because I got some work to do on that box to get it ready to handle this much bass or bass. So yeah, all right, sub, you do your thing in here and we'll go get your new home ready. So for the box itself, the first thing I did was remove the back plate, the old connection, for a few reasons. One, this is plastic, and I'm pretty sure that this new sub would just break it apart. And then two, the connections on this just really aren't that substantial for what could be 1500 watts headed its way. I don't need this choke anymore, and I'll show you why later on in the video when we look at, well, it might not be in this video, it might be in the next video, but either way you'll get to see we're going to be redoing that whole process as far as what feeds a signal to this thing. So we're getting rid of that. Next problem is we have this port here that we don't want anymore. So I think we're going to solve two problems with this. One, this is 3/4 inch. I want it a little bit thicker, a little bit stronger. Actually, I want everything a little bit stronger, so we're going to be gusseting the box. But I'm going to make a panel that goes in the back here, and I just made this. So this, actually I haven't even test fit this yet, so this may end badly. Well, I'm going to glue it and screw it. So that'll help gusset the front. That'll give me about 1.25 inches of material. And then I can put a plate on the back of this, put one on the front, glue it, screw it, and squeeze it nice and tight. So that'll seal up that port very, very well. for the grill, instead of doing what I did before, which really made it inaccessible to get to the subwoofer without destroying the cover, just whipped up a little frame here. So this way I have something that will, or that can be screwed right on and easily removed with 6 screws if I need to get to the woofer for whatever reason. So the only other thing I'm going to do to this, and make sure that you guys can see, well, you can't see, is I'm going to take some speaker gasket material here and I'm going to run it all the way around the perimeter to make sure it doesn't rattle, because this thing definitely will see some serious action. Alright, so I finished up some initial testing and I'm ready to wire it the correct way. So what you see here is a 50-foot spool of 10 gauge pure OFC copper, and that is going to be threaded uninterrupted directly to the sub, and from the sub directly to the amp. So about the nicest way that you can do that without any connections between the two, including binding posts and things like that. So from the testing, I decided we're going to up the stuffing just a little bit, so I grabbed a couple of old pillows that are going to work nicely. And when you do this, if you can, leave the pillows in the case. The case will help to keep all of the little bits of poly from flying around your subwoofer and potentially getting into bad places. So I see a lot of people cut these open and just stuff the poly in there. You can do that, but it's actually a lot smarter. The case will actually do you some favors by keeping all that stuff together. Oh, this part sucks. This thing weighs a ton. Oh! Get in your home! Oh my god. That is tight. Oh my god, is that tight. So for components here, I'm going to be using a Behringer Super X Pro, which is a 4-way electronic crossover network, which is going to be basically replacing what would normally be on a standard powered subwoofer that you would have, you know, on the backing plate. This will allow me to control, actually it does more than that. It allows you to control the level, the cutoff frequency, phase, and even delay, which is really nice to have on a subwoofer. As far as amplification goes, I'm going to continue to use the Crown Microtech 600 that I've been using to power that subwoofer, the previous subwoofer. But again, this one does not put out enough power to drive that sub all the way. So down the road here, this may be getting replaced. But for right now, at 750 watts RMS into a 4-ohm load, it's going to be, you know, trust me, it's 750 watt subwoofer. It's no joke. But I think something around the 12 to 1500 watt range is kind of where I need to be. Alright, so looking at the hookup side here, I'm going to be running a couple of different things. A lot of this is XLR based, so we're going to take the subwoofer output off the receiver, which is the standard RCA connection. And I'll make this all pretty down the road here, but for right now, we'll run the XLR to the input side of the Behringer, and then we're going to take the low frequency output off that Behringer, and we're going to run that up to 2 1/8" connections, which feed the amplifier. Alright, so we're going to fish this guy. Well, we'll fish it all pretty later, but for right now, we are in. So it's up and running. It's ridiculous.
Hey, so I got my bag of tricks. You might want to hop in.
there for a minute. Yeah, it's the lowness that my other sub just didn't have. I think I'm pretty good with this amp for a little while at least, but it could definitely use a little bit more horsepower. What it does to the house is just downright scary. I mean, I was upstairs. Wow, this place is a complete disaster right now. It looks better on camera than it does in real life. The floor is disgusting from doing all these projects, but I was upstairs, and what it does as far as shakes that floor and the walls up, it feels like it's going to rip the house apart. It's incredible. And I've had a lot of different big bass systems in cars before. Cue some of those pictures. So I'm used to some pretty decent bass, but I've never heard one single driver fill a room this big with that much low deep bass. So I really don't think you can beat this dollar per SPL for low hitting subs. And if you think about this and compare it to what you can buy as a pre-built sub, look at the cost side of it. I mean, you build a box for $100. The driver's $325. The amp you can pick up a used like Crown 600 for a couple $100 on eBay. So for around $700, I mean, compared to even an SVS sub, this is going to pound so much harder than anything you could buy pre-built. I would strongly, if you got a little bit of talent in woodwork, and it doesn't have to be pretty, that's the beautiful thing about a sub, is wherever you're putting it, you usually don't see it. You got a little bit of talent there, you can build for $700 what you can't buy for $2,000. So cannot recommend this the most. Stay tuned for details, and we'll see if I decide to pick up another amp. The other problem I found is my projector. It does so much shaking of the house. The projector itself shakes like crazy on some of those bass notes, which is kind of cool, but would have been nice if it didn't do that. I'm not sure. And that's anchored right into my ceiling joists. I can't anchor it any better. So it almost looks like, you know, when filmmakers do that, when there's heavy bass, they shake that camera. It almost looks like it's doing that itself a little bit. But yeah, man, I'm very happy with this setup. So there you go. Thanks as always for watching, everybody. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, or criticisms, throw them down in the comment section below me. And yeah, everybody have a great day.